What's up, everyone? Thralls Metal here once again. I am Necrotic.
And I am Jammin.
And we have an album review for you. So, this time we kind of dove into the underground here with a band that neither one of us had actually jammed before.
Because we never dive into the underground on Thralls.
Ever. So today we are reviewing the newest release from ACXDC, also known as Antichrist Demoncore. This is not your dad's ACDC.
Yeah, no.
Your dad would hate this ACDC.
He sent me a text message earlier today. He was like, dude, I'm jamming this new ACDC. It's awesome. And I was like, what in the hell is your problem? And then I realized that it was not ACDC. This is far from that.
Far removed. Their new album, Satan is King, comes out on the 15th on Prosthetic Records. This is their second full length. And the title is a homage / jab at Kanye West's Jesus is King, which that's fucking funny. This band is a hyper-violent mix of grindcore, power violence, crust punk, and even some hardcore and some death metal.
I'd state there's a lot of hardcore in this album scattered throughout its very short time period of 23 minutes.
Yes.
So...
Now, I had to look up some stuff on Wikia for this one, and what I found was an interesting quote, and this was an actual quote that someone used to describe this band. A strange blend of veganism, straight edge, and Satanism. Those are three things that I never thought would be in a mix there, but that is fucking wild. So this album opens up with Singe, which... if you blink, you'll miss it. It's only 55 seconds, and it is a Nosum-like grind fit with hardcore breakdowns.
Yeah, and Nails.
And Nails. Yep. Nails is going to be one of the base comparisons because they share a lot of similarities in the style overall. I would say these guys lean a little bit more on the hardcore and punk side, versus Nails definitely has more metal to them.
Yeah.
But Nails is definitely a really good base comparison because you have a very similar production on here. You have that almost Swedish buzzsaw guitar tone. I don't think it's as full as Nails, but...
it's there. It's reminiscent of it. It's something...
and there's a thrashy crunch to it, too.
Yep.
Or a hardcore crunch, rather. Because hardcore is like really cool thing that pops up in here in between these grind fits. The song Gorged has like a straight up D-beat sort of drive to it, but in between there you get some very groovy hardcore breakdowns.
Yes.
Some of the stuff even reminded me of Pantera. I was really shocked.
I heard it at times throughout this album. I heard a lot throughout this album as far as other band references are concerned, because there's a lot going on. It's like driving through those little teeny-ass towns on a road trip, where if you don't turn your head fast enough, you miss it. There's a town like that actually in California. It's in Southern California called Boron. Very teeny, tiny town with some ghost town elements. It was kind of neat. But yeah, we turned our head not quick enough and missed that town. That's kind of like this album. So.
The elements just come quick and heavy and just insane. Turncoat was a little bit of a break on here from that, and you hear slower elements on here pop up. Turncoat was probably the first one where it kind of opened up with more of a groovy sort of feel to it, and definitely the hardcore elements.
Well, and doomy, too. The overall mode of that song has kind of a sludgy doom feel to it. I got reminded of Suffocation. There are a lot of Suffocation grooves in this, which is where their death metal influences come out in this record.
And it's an interesting thing with the death metal. It's like death metal meets that early Victory Records sort of sound where all the big, beefy, hardcore bands were coming from. For
a band that doesn't eat meat, they give you a lot of beef in this album.
Yes.
Which is contradictory in nature to veganism, but whatever. Maybe it was a personal sacrifice they made. They said, here, we'll eat these veggie burgers and save you guys the beef, because it's all over this album.
And punk elements are definitely scattered, like just raw punk elements. Copsucker is pretty much a punk song with just ridiculous levels of distortion and hatred. And that is a fucking hilarious title, too.
Also reminded me of Burnt by the Sun. Early Burnt by the Sun. So you get into their first album, the first full-length album, and the elements that they throw in a minute and a half song, the elements that they throw are just remind me a lot of what Burnt by the Sun would do as they trudged through a math-laden world of odd riffs.
Yeah, there was like kind of a Terrorizer-like feel to it. It has a little bit of death grind to it. Now, there are some moments in here that are flat out like more death metal oriented. Exercise in Futility and Urban Blight have some really straightforward death metal elements. In fact, Exercise in Futility has a flat out like tremolo riff that is very like, morbid angel-y.
Yeah.
And it actually kind of brings out kind of a death grind sound, like, Misery Index. And there's even a slam riff on it. There's a fucking dying fetus slam riff on it.
Yeah, dude, for sure. Because that's what reminded me when we saw Dying Fetus a few years ago at Summer Slaughter. They got on stage and said, fucking kill each other.
And they almost did.
Yeah, dude, it was nuts.
One of the cool things about this album, and it's kind of like a microcosm of this style of music, whether it be powerviolence or grindcore, is you have a limited amount of time to compact a lot of ideas on it.
Yeah.
And it isn't necessarily about, like, a lot of flashy playing. It's about the intensity, and this album keeps its foot on the gas.
It never stops punching you in the face.
No.
Period. And from the very rip, from the beginning track, there's no filler, there's no nothing. It's just blah!
Now, later on in the album, it actually started pushing a little bit more of the Crust sound, which I really got into. Ashes of Ashes and Maggot Museum definitely labored the D beat. There's a lot of, like, Dysphere-esque moments on there. Hardcore shouts start becoming a little bit more prominent, too. And I like the vocal layering on here. The vocal layering is really cool because you have 3 distinct voices.
Yes.
You have a grind shriek, a death metal roar, and sort of these hardcore shouts. And when they layer them differently, too. Like, sometimes you'll get the shriek with the growl. Sometimes you get the shriek with the hardcore shout.
And it comes off as almost gang vocals. So almost like grindcore gang vocals, which I didn't know was a thing until today.
When you get to, like, the crustier aspects, you definitely want to bring out those punk elements. And, gang vocals are a huge thing in punk and hardcore. And I really liked, like, these later songs in here. You had some even kind of, like, groovy thrash metal sort of bridges. There's parts in there that reminded me of Power Trip, and the thrash elements definitely scream more crossover.
Yep.
In fact, the opening riff to Propaganda of the Deed is almost reminiscent of March of the SOD.
I get reminded of Superjoint Ritual, too. A lot of the ways that they set up the songs and the grooves and, like, the transitions between the two of them and the way they just volleyed back and forth between, like, hardcore meets almost, like, blackened metal.
Now, Maggot Museum, I thought, was interesting. It's the closer, and it's the only one that really features, like, some really, like, big machine gun guitars.
It is the longest song on the album at 2 minutes and 28 seconds.
And it actually has some cool slower moments in there, like some almost kind of sludge metal riffs. There were parts on there that reminded me of something you'd hear on, like, a Crowbar album, or maybe even, like, Tony Iommi.
Actually, there was a part in there that reminded me of one of the riff chugs off the first Alice in Chains record, too.
Yeah.
It was weird. Like, I didn't expect that comparison at all.
And this was the only track on there that really had, like, some kind of atmosphere to it, because most of these songs are just one after the other, whooping the shit out of you.
Yeah.
This one actually took some breaks, and you could really hear, like, how heavy the production was, too.
It even had, like, a small tribal drum section in it, which, again, didn't appear at all.
Yeah.
As far as a closer track for an album like this, I'd say this closes this album really well.
Yeah. Offered a little bit of something different there, and just capped it off with heaviness, but just a little bit different kind.
Yeah.
Overall, I dug this album. This was a fucking fun listen. I love grindcore. Grindcore is one of my big things. I mean, if you haven't seen all the grindcore videos I've done, definitely check them out, because
both of us are guilty of throwing in grindcore here. So,
but overall, I'm gonna give this 3.5 stars. This is a solid listen. If you love power violence, grindcore, crust punk, even some thrashy stuff and death metal, it's all here. It's just all in a very condensed and very hostile form, because this album hates fucking everything,
dude,
all the time, everywhere.
By the time they get to the end, like, if we were to see this live, at this point in the game, I'd say if they played all the tracks, if they just played this whole album, everybody would be dead by, like, the 4th song, and they'd just be playing to corpses, so...
It'd be just like a circle of corpses.
I'm also going to give this 3.5 stars. I really dug this album. Of course, again, I'm a fan of grindcore anyway. This was really elemental for grindcore. There were definitely things that I don't think you would hear in a normal, straightforward grindcore album. And I really like the production on this album, and the guitars, again, are honing in on this, what seems to be a growing trend for, like, kind of a Swedish buzzsaw, but not really. I think that appears in a lot of bands.
Oh, no, I love HM2
Ultra Tume,
bands.
Two Mold, fucking... Hell, even Blood Incantation has it a little bit. So, I mean, it was good. It was a good jam. I was really surprised. So that's why I got 3.5.
So, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do shit like this all the time. And...
And We still have our Instagram, which, thank you guys, is really picking up in popularity. I know there's a couple bands I still need to make it through here, but it's cool. I'm having a lot of fun. Definitely look us up and subscribe to our Instagram. We've got some cool content that's going to make its way there. I know we're definitely in talks to do some really neat shit with some fun people. So that's a good time. Yeah, please come to Instagram. Once again, if you have a band that needs to be heard and you don't have the right avenue to get it out there, I'll give you a 2 or 3 minute review, something to send you along, and see if we can push you guys forward a little bit too.
You guys take her easy.
Cheers.